In the early morning light of August 18th, 1590, a ship with billowing sails pierced the water off the outer banks of what is now North Carolina. Wearing a dark cloak, a man sat on a stool near the rail and sketched something on a pad. The man's name was John White, a British artist and governor of Roanoke. Except for a few wind gusts and the creaking ship, not much could be heard. The silence unnerved White. He looked up from his work and peered toward the eastern horizon. The sun began to peek over the dark outline of the banks. "Just a few more hours and we'll reach Roanoke," thought White. White glanced down at his drawing, a picture of a lovely young woman. A stab of fear pierced his heart. 3 long years. I should have never left my beloved daughter Eleanor and her child Virginia, and the other colonist. White gently stroked the picture. He thought back to August 18th, 1587. Then White had been in charge of an English colony of about 100 people located on Roanoke Island. Although a skilled artist, John White was not a very strong leader. Many colonists complained of his governing and resented having an artist as a leader of their group. However, no amount of complaining had been able to dampen White's mood that day. His daughter had just given birth to a baby girl named Virginia Dare. But White's good humor was short-lived. A few days later, many colonists began to complain heavily about the lack of supplies. They convinced the indecisive White to sail back to England for more provisions. After all, White thought, I won't be gone more than a year. He had been wrong, though. Political unrest between England and Spain delayed the return of the expedition for 3 long years. Now, seated on deck, White folded up his drawing, placed it in his vest pocket, and stared across the water. I'll be returning on the 3rd birthday of my granddaughter, he thought. Maybe this is a good sign. Indeed, his hope was kindled further a few hours later when he saw a stream of smoke rising from Roanoke Island. However, by the time the ship reached the island, the smoke had disappeared. White, the ship's captain, and a few sailors landed and then hurried towards the fort that the colonists had built 3 years earlier. The walls were still standing and seemed in decent condition, but everything was strangely silent. "Hello!" White shouted. No response. A sense of dread filled him. As White approached the fort, he noticed the word Croatan carved on one of the fort's doorposts. He rushed inside and gasped with disbelief. Gone. The buildings, the houses, the shelter were all gone, and not one person other than his companions was in sight. Frantically, he searched the grounds. All he could find were a few small cannons and an open chest. Then he heard a shout. John and the captain ran in the direction of the sound. Soon they saw one of the sailors pointing toward a nearby tree. Out of breath, White reached the tree and saw the letters C-R-O carved on it. "It's a message," exclaimed White. "This and the word Croatan. The settlers are telling us that they had gone to Croatan Island. We must sail there immediately." "We'll give it a try, but a storm is brewing, and we'll be heading into the teeth of it," replied the captain. Several storms hit, which made it impossible for the ship to reach the island. John White clenched some rigging as the ship tossed in the fierce gale. The ship's captain stood nearby. To be heard above the wind, White yelled, "We must keep trying." "I can't," shouted the captain. "I have the crew to think of. Besides, by now we're probably closer to England than to America." "No!" White shrieked in despair, but to no avail. Soon, the captain gave the order to sail to England.